Hello, everybody, and welcome to Revit Pure Live. My name is Nicolas Catelier. I am a BIM specialist and architect and the founder of the website revitpure.com. Revit Pure Live is a show where typically we help you become a better Revit user. In this case, this is a special episode where we'll talk more about BIM and digital processes in AEC. Before moving on to the guest, I'll ask the chat a question as I usually do, and I want to know where you're watching from. Always fun to see where are everyone from. And while you're doing that, I can announce that there is a sponsor for this episode, and the sponsor is AVAIL. AVAIL is a desktop software that helps you organize, visualize, search for, and share assets across your organization, whether it is a 3-person firm or 3,000 people firms. It has Revit integration built in and a seamless way to visualize all your files, including URL, images, PDF, Excel, spreadsheets, and Google Docs. What I've been so impressed with AVAIL is the Harvest feature. And what Harvest does is you select a Revit file and it's search inside of it, and you can select specific schedules, details, drafting views, groups, families, system families, anything. It integrated into the AVAIL Cloud platform, and then you can simply drag and drop from the AVAIL Cloud platform to any projects. Working with clients, it's often a problem that they don't know how to manage libraries, and with the old techniques of having a local server with a family folder somewhere, or you're never sure shall I include it in the template or not, AVAIL really simplifies that by having access, especially the way it's made. You have visual previews of the details, and as you can see, you can simply drag and drop a detail like this to a sheet, for example. So really an easy way to manage your details. There's also other integrations beside Revit, such as AutoCAD, Rhino, 3ds, and you also have metadata control. For example, you can access all the assets on Excel and add information so you can better sort and group them, for example. You can also manage your image and other assets. So basically, if you are having troubles managing your libraries, details, all this file in AVAIL, have a look at this platform, great cloud platform. You can get more information at getavail.com. And also, AVAIL created a special URL, which is resources.getavail.com/RevitPure, or if you have a look at the video description, you will also find this URL. So thank you, AVAIL, for sponsoring Revit Pure Live. Something else, again, before moving on with the guest. Episode 33 of Revit Pure Live is next week, Wednesday, 3 p.m., same time. And this time it is with a fellow Francophone, Fanny Angeles, originally from France. She's now living in Portland in the USA. And she will be talking about historic European modeling. So we'll be using Revit to model different types of European architecture, historic elements like medieval architecture, Tudor architecture, and Stuart architecture. It should be pretty interesting. Make sure to tune in next week at 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, a quick glance at the chat. People from Poland, near me in Montreal, Gatineau, Brazil, Italy, St. Louis, Kansas City, Belgium, Prague, Indiana, Costa Rica, Kosovo, Lexington, Belgium, Algeria, Israel, Lebanon. Always impressed to see all the people in the chat and where they're from. Thanks for watching from all around the world. All right, so today's guest is Marzia Bolpagni. Marzia is the head of BIM International and an associate director at Mace. She has a PhD from Politecnico di Milano. Her thesis was about ways of managing and controlling public works through innovative digital approaches. She holds a master's degree in building and civil engineering from the University of Brescia in Italy. In addition to her work at Mace, Marzia is very active on numerous BIM and EC initiatives, including being the lead author of the European Standard on Level of Information Need, a visiting professor at Northumbria University, an honorary lecturer at UCL in London, the founder of Italian Digital Transformation in the UK, a STEM ambassador, and a member of BIM Excellence Initiative. She also won numerous awards, including the Young Engineer of the Year from the Royal Academy of Engineering in 2021, the Emerging Professional of the Year in 2021 from the Association for Consultancy in Engineering, and the Woman of the Future winner last year as well. So that was quite a while. So welcome to the show, Marzia.
Thank you very much. No pressure after this.
Yeah. I set the bar pretty high, right?
Exactly. No, thank you very much for having me, and congratulations for the community that you create. I was so amazed by reading through the chat, all the people that are listening all over the world. It's a very good job.
Yeah, me too. I'm surprised each time to see people all around the world. And yeah, so it's true that we were chatting about this before the show. Usually it's the topics are a little more on the technical side, a little more on the software itself, but I've been really curious recently about all the BIM processes. I've been trying to read the new the ISO 19650 norm. I got some part, I'll admit that some of it confused me a little bit. And yeah, I've been just trying to understand more the BIM standards and approaches. So I think
sure.
you should help with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that BIM is, we know that BIM is not just technology and one tool in particular.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of processing and procedures. So I think it also from the people that are listening, maybe can be inspirational to progress in their career, or maybe to, empower themselves. So I hope that what we will cover today will be helpful, and maybe also in the future, I can speak also more about the ISO 19650, but in general, I will give you an overview about different topics also regarding standardization.
All right. So one of the first questions I usually ask my guests is, how did you get interested in BIM?
No, that is a very good question. So everything started in university. I was lucky that when studying building engineering in Italy, one of the professor, that is Angelo Ciribini, introduced BIM. It was 2011-12 when I was still studying. And I was really impressed because it was something completely different from what I was, learning. And so I decided that actually I want to proceed in my career in that way. And I remember after I graduate, one of my colleagues say, this will never happen in Italy and Europe, why you are, you decided to choose this as a topic of your thesis and so on. And I just didn't listen. I really believed that was the future. And, I'm here, and I've been lucky enough to then start my PhD, work in US, in Finland, in the UK, in different countries. And now I help clients to implement BIM in their organization, in their projects. So yeah, I think that it was the right choice.
And what were you studying originally? Was it engineering?
Yeah. So it's called building engineering. That is between architecture and civil engineer, because we know that this is the discrepancy between the structural engineer and the architects. So in Europe, actually, they created this degree that is called building engineering, and is a 5 years, master course. And at the end, you can decide to be chartered engineer, civil engineer, or chartered architect, or both.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. So today's topic, and I think I didn't mention it on the bio, one of the recent book you've been part of, there are also other co-authors as well. And I think it's quite a big book from what I've saw. It's about Industry 4.0. So one of the questions, perhaps you have a slide about it, but quickly, I know a little bit about it, but how would you define Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I think that I have done a presentation regarding that, but I think that in the school, all of us, we studied the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, the second, the third, and now we're speaking about the fourth revolution. That actually is quite a new topic, because it's the first revolution that actually we are living as an observer, or actually as a first actor, and not something that happened in the past. So it's really about how we connect different technologies that are out there, and also we link the physical with the cyber physical space, and also, using the Internet of Things and so on, robotics. And in particularly, the book that I've been editing with other two editors is how to use the principles of the Industry 4.0 for the built environment, because we noticed that other sectors such as the manufacturing and aerospace are moving to that area, but what about our sector? And it's quite interesting because I read to a point of my career then, I specialize on BIM, but I wanted to broaden my, my knowledge, and probably also some of the listeners today, they want to know more, how can I upskill myself, and BIM and in general, creating the information models that we create is really central to what is the Industry 4.0. So I think that is quite an interesting topic for also the listener.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So if you want, I know you have a few slides, a few images to share with us, and I will now switch so we can see your slide.
Yeah.
No, actually, you can see the thumbnail from this episode.
Good. So I can move the slide. That's right.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We can see them.
Yeah, good. Okay. So yeah, I think that I've been already introduced. So you can see I'm active in the industry, in the academia, also different community activities, and also on standardization. And this is the book that has been mentioned. I will say something about some of the initiatives that I'm involved with, so that I hope that that can be useful also for you. So my presentation is divided in main three parts. One is about the BIM initiatives. The second is about standardization and the level of information need. And then I have something regarding Industry 4.0 and a little bit of presentation of the book. Let's start with the first part regarding the BIM initiatives. So the first initiative that I want to speak is about the BIM Excellence Initiative, and also the BIM Dictionary. And I don't know how many of you are already familiar with the BIM Dictionary and the BIM Excellence Initiative?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would be curious. Yeah, I know the BIM initiative. I don't know about it, but I've been using the BIM Dictionary in the past.
Let me check in the chat if...
Yeah, there's just so you know, there's like a 20 seconds delay between.
Yeah, I noticed, don't worry. So feel free to write in the chat if anyone is familiar with the BIM Dictionary and the BIM Excellence Initiative. In the meantime, I will open the website. So if you type bimexcellence.org, you land to the BIM Excellence Initiative website, and actually is a community of professional and people in the academia that at international level that we work together in order to create shared content. And we have our mission principles and the manifesto as well. So I invite everyone to read the mission, the principle, and also to sign the excellent manifesto if you agree with that. So it really is a community that is open to everyone. So you can see here that the mission is to accelerate the digital transformation in the built environment, and to achieve that by demonstrating new ways of thinking, researching, and learning, and collaborating. And here you can read also the goals and the deliverables. Personally, I like the resources, and you can see here that there are different resources that are available for free that you can use under the open license, Creative Commons, if I'm not wrong, license. So what I like, for example, is the model use list that I also use in my day-to-day job. It is available also in different languages. And if you have a look to the one in English, you can see that there is all the different uses that you can use your model for. And for example, you can use your model for 2D documentation, but also for disaster planning, space programming, and so on. So you can use these to communicate with your colleagues or your clients in order to create your information requirements or your BIM solution plan. And what I like is also that is linked to the BIM dictionary, that, you know, if you click, it will open the BIM dictionary. So you can also find by bimdictionary.com, and is a dictionary that is available again for free, has been translated in 27 languages so far. And so you can really type the acronym or the term that you are looking for. And yeah, so just, you know, there are 110 terms, 27 languages. Yeah, I've been part of this now for 5 years. You can see also the contributors across the globe, and why not? Maybe in the future, if you don't find your language, maybe you can be part of this community and contribute in translating that. So you can see. So have a look. If you have any questions, also feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, I've been glancing quickly at the chat. Some people knew about it, and some people mentioned Bilal. I think is a quarter of the BIM.
Yeah, Bilal Sukar is being the founder of the initiative, and is promoting the initiative. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and actually, I saw that the French version was made here in Quebec, and there's an initiative here from the government called the BIM Diagnostics for companies, and they use this with companies. They do a diagnostic. They use what kind of BIM use do you plan to use in your company?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll let you go on.
No, that is good. So yeah, I hope that was useful, and yeah, feel free to get in touch and so on. So yeah, the other thing that I want to mention briefly, also ambassador of the UK BIM Alliance, and in particular, if you are starting your journey with a standard that you will see later on the ISO 19650, you can go to the UK BIM framework, and in particular on the you can look at the standard, but also the guidance material that is available for free. So hopefully, maybe also Nicholas, if you want to, you know, of course you need to use the guidance together with the standard, but hopefully it can help people to understand better and how to implement. It is specific for the UK, but some generic principles might be useful for all the different users. And when you go to the resources also, there is here information requirements dataset example, and when you click here, there is an example, and I mentioned because I will show you later on. This is an application of how you can define the level of information needs. So yeah, so feel free to have a look, and yeah, I hope that can be useful. So I'll go back to the slide. So this was to show you and share a little bit about some initiative that I'm working at the moment.
Yeah, I think we might come back to some of the ISO norms later on, but for now, I'll let you go.
Yeah, good. Let's now start with the standardization level of information need. I think that for some of you might be a boring topic. You say, oh, you know, I want just to, I'm an architect, I'm a designer, you know, I want to mainly modeling. But I think that if you want to be the best version of yourself, and also, as I say, to improve in your career, I think that knowing about the standardization can really help to advance in your career path. So I don't know if you know, but actually there are different, let's say, levels of standardization and different bodies that create standard. At international level, there is the ISO. Probably you know this, the ISO standard, for example, on quality. There are actually standards not just in construction, but in all the different areas. Actually, I've been told that also there is a standard also to do pizza. So, you know, a variety of topics. Also for the people that are listening that actually are from Europe, also there is a European Committee for Standardization. and that also deals with BIM standards. And at national level, actually, there are different standardization bodies. So I really suggest, if you don't know already, to check which is the national body in your country. And you will be surprised that, maybe you didn't know. But you can get in touch with them and also, work on standardization on BIM and also other topics. So let's move on. Do you know any standard at international level regarding BIM? And do you know any standard at European level regarding BIM? So I will give you time to write in the chat. So anyone knows? We mentioned also some of those. And then, Nicholas, you can tell me also afterwards, because I know that we are waiting. But one example, I don't know if you know, but actually IFC is actually an international standard, and the number of the standard is ISO 16739. And of course, also there is the ISO 19650 that also we mentioned. That is a series of standards. So it's not just one standard, but we have ISO 19650 Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 5 at the moment, covering different topics. And at European standard, it is the standard that we will speak later on the level of information need. That is a concept that is, let's say, evolving the concept of LOD that probably most of you are already familiar with. So, yeah, so...
I was mentioning, I knew about ISO 19650. I knew there were a few other ISOs, but I never thought that like IFCs were its own ISO norm. I never thought about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
Other feedback from the audience?
Yeah, like a few people might mention the ISO norms, Euro codes, information delivery manual standard. Oh, where's somebody? I think it's Mikhail from Israel that says, "Don't forget to tell Marzia that Yuri Gurevich says hi."
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we are collaborating on different topics. So.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, my regards also to the people that I know that are in the audience. Yeah, hopefully we can meet in person soon again.
Yeah. Great.
Good. Okay, so something that I want you to be able to read standard just is a very simple thing, but I find people that get always wrong. So there are different, let's say, prefix in front of the standard, and usually when it is an international standard, just international is called, you put ISO in front. When you're European, you put EN, and then each country has their own, prefix. For example, in Italy, you have UNI, UNI. Okay, in UK, for example, it is BS, that is from the British standard. Okay, so what is important is that standards that get adopted at international level, if they can also get adopted in Europe, and so you can have ISO and then the number, and then it will become EN ISO, okay, and then the number. And then when it is adopted at a national level, you actually added the prefix. So for example, in Italy, when we adopt an international standard that has been adopted also in Europe, then it will become UNI and ISO and then follow the number. Why I'm saying that is because, for example, in countries that are not European, then you just have the prefix of the country plus ISO, okay? Why I say that? Because people have this perception that all the standards are the same. But I give you an example of the ISO 19650. In the UK, they created an appendix to Part 2. So it's really important that for you also as a user is important to understand which version are we referring to. The more generic one at international level, the European one, or the national level that also can have a national appendix. So it can seem like simple things, but actually, trust me, in contracts, it's really important that you are specific, and also that can make your life easier if you are really clear about, how you define standards. So yeah, so, again, you can have ISO 19650 and ISO 19650 part 2, for example, and then you can have the UNI and ISO 19650 part 2. Let's now ask you, do you know how many BIM standard at ISO levels are there? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, before saying I actually saw the answer earlier on, but while we were chatting, my initial answer would have been like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So let's see people in the chat if you can answer that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's wait for them, and then you can tell me, if they answer. But yeah, so let's wait a few seconds. You can also ask Google.
Yeah, because most people are aware of the ISO 19650, or at least it's the first one I've read about it. And then by learning that one, it referred to other ISO norms, so I knew there were a couple. So people...
Maybe some say too many, yeah.
Yes, too many, 5. Somebody says thousands.
Okay, let me check. Okay, someone say, 5 and so on, but yeah. So the reality is that there are 19 published standards that are on BIM, and also 7 are under development. So the reality is that really this is also quite an evolving topic. And also, if you want to implement in your project the different standards, it's important that also you always keep an eye open. What probably you need to remember is that the international body that is responsible of BIM has a number, and it is ISO TC 59 SC 13. So if you type that on, on the web, you can actually find the page with all the information. And actually, what I'm doing also with Uri, and that has been mentioned before, we are working at European level to create interactive dashboard with all the different standards, and it will be published quite soon in the next month. So that will help people to understand, okay, I'm a designer, which standard on BIM should I know? So yeah, hopefully that will help users. So we are creating this in an interactive and visual way, so that to make more.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because it can be a little hard to know which one you should have a look at.
Exactly. So we define by different phases of the project, by different topics, and so on. So is keep an eye open and follow our activities, because hopefully that can help. Okay, good. I want now to jump to a little bit more specific topic, that is the level of information needed. Actually, I've been working in the past years to on this particular topic, and if I think that most of you are familiar with the concept of LOD, level of development, and so on. So if I ask you which LOD is this door, do you want to try to answer?
Yeah, I know it's very hard, and sometimes when people ask what LOD they should model in, it's often, well, let's put in LOD 350, that should be okay. And especially if it's for architects, then if it's manufacturing, it might be a little higher. But honestly, I think people don't really know. Yeah,
but I think that this is also, particularly for people that follow your channel, because, I mean, I have this experience that, I don't know, probably there are some architects or some engineers that they created the models during the design, but actually they don't realize that afterwards, during the construction, also the maintenance, all those models are thrown away, nobody's using. And I will discuss also this later on, but why they're not used is because they're not, there can be different reasons, but one of the reasons is because they are not fit for purpose. So we live in different, phases where actually we need to model and remodel. And when we started this work at European level, it was really about how we can be smart and in the way that we create information, because I know the pain of creating models. Trust me, I've been modeling for several years, and I know this is really time consuming. But how we can create value, how we can create something that really can help different parties on the project, how really can use information, create this golden thread of information. Because I mean, what I told myself is that I don't want to create something that just will be useful to extract drawings or to create nice visualization and that's it. I want really to make the power of information management, the power of creating information models. And the reason why we at European level created this framework in order to define better how we would like the information to be. So, okay, so in the chat, I can see most say 350.
That's the most concern. I think somebody says also might have been deleted, but I would check the parameters of the door. Not a bad answer.
Yeah. So the reality is that really there are a lot of different terms, definitions. So for example, if you work in the UK, you don't use the LOD from 100 to 500, but actually there are from 1 to 7. In other countries, also, for example, in Italy, we have letters from A to G and so on. So really, there is a lot. There is no one answer. So my point was that there is no one way. And actually, even if all of us here we are expert, it's quite difficult to provide one answer to that. What we usually do, and we created those documents where we define the different elements. So we have a breakdown structure, and then we define for different phases which is the LOD, and we usually put a number as we discussed. But of course, as I said, in different countries, there are also different standards on that. But what we ask ourselves is that is this really clear for everyone? So are we sure that when I've been asked to create a model LOD 350, are we really sure that all of us will understand how to create that, both on the geometrical side and also the alphanumerical? And something that for me is quite important, if I receive a model, how can I check if it's really LOD 300? Because this is maybe some of you never thought about that, but also can have legal implication, because someone can tell you, oh, actually you didn't model LOD 300, and it's quite difficult for you to say, oh, actually no, this is 300. It's quite open to interpretation. So I think that we as an industry, we can do better on the way that we specify the information and we create information. I think that is also why we are here today. And another thing is that all of us, or most of us, when we were kids, we were playing this game to put the right shape in the right hole. I think that's probably you have this experience. And the ideas of the level of information need framework is really to specify really what we need. So then the designer can provide exactly what the client or your colleagues is asking for. So we want to avoid as much as possible, interpretation. So really we can create information can be useful. So really about avoiding waste, provide the right information at the right time, and also enable automatic compliance checking. That has been one of the topics that has been the start of my career, and I really care about compliance checking of the information models. So is a framework to define the quality, quantity, granularity of information requirements. We tend not to use acronyms, not just because it's a bad word, but also is because we want to move away about just to say LOD something. And it's important to start with the end in mind and understand what I want to do, why I'm creating information. Because as I showed you before regarding with the different list of model uses, that in that list how many model uses there are. There are more than 50 different ways that we can use the model. So we have more than 50 purposes on how we can use our models. And this is just an example. If you want to do cost analysis, you might need a certain amount of information, but actually if you want to do thermal analysis, actually there are different information. So, and I've been really struggle at the beginning of my career in receiving model from the architects. And the first thing that I had to do, it was to clean things because there was too much information that for me was not useful as an engineer. So the idea is that how we can improve this process. Again, why when we receive the model from the designer in the construction phase, we need to remodel? That is not efficient. And I think that the technology is actually there to help us to improve this. So very briefly, this is the framework of the level of information need. There is some prerequisite. So you need to define why you need the information. When the information is needed, you can put a date or a milestone. Who is responsible to define the information, to provide you the information, to check the information, and also which is the object of the breakdown structure that you need. This can be the entire model, because at the beginning of the project, you don't have elements. So you can define your information requirements at building level or infrastructure level, okay? So, or site level. And instead, when then you progress in your development or your project, then you can be more granular. But also some discipline, they define the requirements at system level. So the ventilation system, for example. So really is important to have this flexibility. Instead, the other frameworks that we have in the industry are really rigid. For example, or you can just define the LOD just at element level. You cannot define for the assembly, for the part, for the component, for the entire model. So instead, the reality is that is more flexible. And then we have the level of information need framework itself that is subdivided in three different aspects. One is the geometrical information, then we have alphanumerical information, and the documentation. So the geometrical information has different aspects. So the detail, and we'll see in a second, the dimensionality. Do you need a point, a line, a surface, or is it 3D? The location is absolute or relative. So you just care that a chair is in a space, or you want that to be geolocated. So it is really important so that also we know how to create the information. Also the appearance. Do you want to be, maybe you don't care about the appearance, so we don't spend, hours and hours to assign the material to the different object, because just maybe our model will just be used for quantity takeoff. So that is not, it's really important to understand why we are creating the information, because also there is a time and the cost associated to that. And also the parametric behavior, so how the geometry is can be modified also later on, because I have experience of colleagues or other partners that they receive geometry that then cannot be changed later on, and this is a problem because maybe they needed to do adjustments. Alphanumerical information is really about the list of the attributes that you need, for example, the material, the warranty period, the manufacturer, and so on, and also the documentation, the list of documents that support particular purposes. I have here very quickly, I know that this will require maybe just, half a day to go through that, but you can see here the detail, how you would like elements to be modeled, then you need to be more specific, how you would like the connection to be modeled, you would like the operational, for example, zone to be included, you needed to be more specific. So people that then created the model, they know exactly what should be created. The dimensionality, as I said, especially in infrastructure, we find that still some elements, for example, are modeled as a line, but actually are lines that are parametric objects, so that can be measured, for example, or counted. Of course, we tend to model most of the things in 3D, but based on the purpose and the phase, there might be also some elements that we want also in other dimension. The location, as I told you, that can be geolocated or maybe just absolute, so you don't care. The appearance, again, it can be a symbolic. For example, one example that I usually do is about hot and cold water, or maybe it can be more the appearance of the material, or you can have realistic material. I think that you know this very well, but it's important for you that you are modeling to know which is actually the appearance that you want to have. And the parametric behavior, of course, you want to know if the geometry can then be modified later on, because if it's still a parametric object. Alphanumerical information, I think that you know this very well. So it's really the list of the different attributes that you have. As some of you mentioned before, what I do, I check the door and I check which information there are. And the set of documents can be reports, can be drawings, can be photos, and so on. For example, if the purpose is the building permits, maybe still you need also to have some documents that you include in your commodity environment, and you can refer to your to the geometrical representation, but also it can live in the commodity environment, because you know, there is this idea that everything should be in the model, but the idea is that everything should be in the commodity environment. So here is an example, and this was an example of the prerequisites. So you can define the why, the different milestone, and defining the actor, also using classification such as Uniclass, and also the object, you can use IFC or other way of defining the object within your breakdown structure. So where you can find more information about that, so the concept has been created initially introduced in the ISO 19650, particularly part 1 on the concept and principles. In the UK, there is this guidance that has been quoted with Emma Hooper that I'm always happy to mention her, and that you can find a guidance. And at European level, there is this standard that is specific on the level of information need. We are bringing also this standard at an international level. So yeah, so watch this space so that it will be expanded. And we are also on part 2 of the standard that is related to the guidance on the application, and part 3 that is a data schema for the software developers. So we are working, and there are experts from you know, more than 20 countries that are collaborating on this effort. Yeah, and this is an example that I showed you before. So feel free to have a look and see, you know, an example of how this can be applied.
So I do have quite a few questions before we move on. Well,
Sure.
first, since you were on that topic, the last slide, what was that software? Is it to manage database? The Airtable, yeah?
So yeah, Airtable, so again, the framework is independent from the technology. So you can use really different type of technology. I'm not here to selling tools, but for example, there is, you know, what is the name? Plannerly, there is Morta, there is Airtable, you can do in Excel, there is BIMQ, there are a lot of different tools, but Airtable is an advanced way of Excel, let's say, and also there is a free version, so it's moving more to a database approach instead of Excel.
I have a lot of questions. One of them is, who's the main person responsible for thinking about level information? Is it the client? Is it the contractor? Is it the architect? Who is it?
Is a very good question. So the answer is everyone, because everyone needs information for different purposes. So we would like to have intelligent clients that they tell us, oh, I would like exactly those information. I would like the model to be, you know, produced in that way, and so on. But we know, I think that most of us, we have experienced that actually most of the clients still are at the beginning of their journey. So for example, also according to the ISO 19650, there are different options. So one option is that the clients start defining the level of information need themselves. The second option is that they appoint an independent third party, so a consultant, to define the level of information needed for their project. Okay, so maybe that can be your future job. Okay, you help clients to define the level of information needed for their project. Or then the third option of the ISO 19650 part 2 is that they delegate to the designer or the contractor. That is what's happened most of the time. They say, I don't know about this, you know, define the requirements and deliver the work. Of course, that is not the ideal solution, but I notice in my experience that more and more, at least my clients, that they are becoming more advanced. So at least, for example, if they needed to maintain the asset, they come to me with, Marzia, this is the list of maintainable assets, and I would like to have information such as the name, the type, the warranty period, the manufacturer, the warranty duration, and so on, because they understand the power of the data. Maybe regarding the geometrical information, they need some simplified geometry, not so detailed. But then at the same time, think about an architect that collaborates with a structural engineer or a geotechnical engineer. They still need information from them, so they also can use this framework to ask information to their, for the other, peers, let's say. It can be within your company or it can be within another company. And I hope that I answered to your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so it's the role of everybody, but the client should be kind of the main person thinking about this, which leads to another question is often I'm an architect, so I have this bias of thinking from an architect point of view. Often the legal document are the printed PDF, and sometimes more and more we're starting to see BIM, but it's kind of a tricky thing still. And so there will be plans, and sometimes the contractor will kind of remodel, or sometimes we share the model, but there's this weird legal limbo. So how do you deal with this? Do you know what I'm talking about in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, it's another big topic that probably you need to dedicate one session regarding the legal. So it's a big topic, and so there are people that are even more specialized on that. But what is important is that sometimes I've been contacted by clients when there is already a problem. So they say, "Oh, Marzia, we don't, the designer didn't provide the model, or actually that is not being created how we wanted," and so on. And the first thing that I ask, I don't want to see any model. I ask, can you share with me the contract? And most of the time there is nothing in the contract. So even if we speak at BIM is about collaboration and so on, still we rely on the contract. So it's really important that since the beginning there is someone that understands, the process and define very clear information in the contract. Because coming back to your point, there is not a right or a wrong way. It really depends how you want to set your project and your strategy. So it is, do you want the designer that is responsible for the model from the briefing until the handover, or maybe also after, also during maintenance? Or do you want the architect just to be responsible for the creation of the model until then the contractor comes on board? It also depends really about the procurement. There are some collaborative procurements, and sometimes is design build, design build, construction management. There are also IPD and so on. So it's really is a topic on their own, and is the reason why you need to have smart people that deal with the process. So I hope that also people that are listening that understand that BIM is not just about creating the models. There is, if you want really to be successful, you need to take into account all these variety of aspects.
All right, that answers a few more questions, but I think I will let you go to talk about Industry 4.0, and then with the remaining time, hopefully we can answer some more. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I will try to be brief on this because, again, Industry 4.0 is, as we discussed, is a wider topic. But for me, BIM was not enough. I wanted to understand better the industry. And a disclaimer, I'm not an expert of every topic about Industry 4.0, but I think it is good for us to understand the complexity of the topic, and then we can decide to specialize on one or more, okay? I want to thank my co-authors, Rui Gavina and Diogo Ribeiro. So feel free also to get in touch with them. And I will be happy also if you ask them also in the future. They're really great experts on BIM. And the book that we've been working on is called Industry 4.0 for the Built Environment, and is about the methodology, technology, and skills. That is really important because when we started this work, we found a lot of work on the technologies and the tools, but really less on the methodologies and even less on the skills, and in particular the soft skills that I will tell you. So it's a good mix between people from industry and academia, because we want to have this mix, and variety also of countries that also are represented as author. And there are 28 chapters, and as I said, methodologies, technologies, and trends in the soft skills. So that is quite interesting, because it's quite the more we use the digital, we experience that you need also to invest on the soft skills, the communication, leadership, and how you use social media and so on. So that is quite important. Something about history, I think that probably you remember better than I do, regarding the different industrial revolution, from the steam, introduction of the steam, from the electricity introduction with the second revolution, to then the introduction of internet and the computers, to then what we are studying, let's say, or experience now and observing, that is the so-called fourth industrial revolution, that, as we say, combining the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, the cyber physical space, and so that is something regarding the background. So they're not just evolution, but why they're called revolution is because they are completely changed the way that we interact, that we do business, and we exchange, let's say, service, products, and how we work and live. Interesting enough, there are some people that also starting to speak about Industry 5.0. Actually, there is also this report. But what we believe is that is not really a new revolution, but is to put the emphasis on aspect that probably in 2011, when we started to speak about Industry 4.0, we didn't take into account. So the key points are really focus on the human at the center, and not to have this machine-centric approach. Of course, the sustainability, that is a big topic, and also how to be resilient. So what is called Industry 4.5, let's say, 5.0 is taking into account those. But we want also to be a little bit realistic. The second revolution regarding electricity, but still 70% of the people on the globe, they don't have access to electricity. And also 0.5% of the world still they don't have access to internet. So really we are creating this gap, and also us as a community, we need to ask ourselves how we can avoid or reduce this gap, because we will want to accelerate with the, we all speak about Industry 4.0 and so on, but I'm really the kind of person that want to speak about Hollywood BIM on Hollywood things. We need just to be realistic, We experience a variety of, let's say, of situation. What you will see here, that also you can read in more detail in the book, is how construction reacted to the different industrial revolution. So, starting from the first revolution with the new material that also help us to, create new buildings, okay, and also the mass production, to then with the second industrial revolution, when we start to use CAD, and then to the third revolution, when we start to speak about BIM, and with the also facility management systems, and so on. To then what we are now looking at with the fourth industrial revolution is how we can integrate BIM with IoT, big data, lean construction, and so on. Here is a summary of our framework, and I just want to give you, a quick overview. There are different technologies available at the moment: gamification, how we use gaming, to be used in the construction site, during design and so on, extended reality, manufacturing, the digital twins, the blockchain and all the topic of the cybersecurity, reality capture, and also the structural health monitoring. Then we have what we call concept and methodology, and the difference between technology and methodology sometimes really can vary, but you can see here that we have GIS, computational design, BIM, of course, new business models, the legal aspect that you, Nicholas, mentioned, the sustainability, information visualization. Also, there is a chapter just about how we can optimize the way that we create our visual representation dashboard and so on, because it's so important. Link data, all the agile methodology, so how we can work agile. This chapter also is really interesting, but how we can link BIM with agile, for example. Quality management, of course, lean construction, health and safety, the risk emergency, and big data and cloud computing. So there is a chapter for all of those topics regarding to construction. And again, the last layer, that is the soft skills, the communication, digital leadership, managing relationship, and professional impact. So really important. Because, really the digital, the physical, they meet together, and then is how we can start to do intelligent stuff. So BIM is, of course, one of the core part, and it's good that you are investing your career on that. But of course, the reality, when we can start to do interesting things for our clients and for ourselves, is where we combine those different words and technology. So it's the reason why we want to explore this topic of the Industry 4.0. And there are different supporting fields that we mentioned, and then some enablers that has been mentioned. So another things very quickly is about education. So there is a chapter that really explain how we can upskills and reskill ourselves, and also the collaboration with the academia, for example. And what I have here about skills, I think that probably you experience is also some colleagues that are old schools. So how we can upskill and reskills them. That is quite an interesting topic that is covered in the book. And the other thing that might be also useful for you is to think bigger and to think about the next step in your career, because there are emerging roles. And we cover, for example, some of the roles that are part of the National Digital Twinning Program in the UK, for example, an ontologist, how you can be a digital twin architect, how you can be a data regulator, how you can be a cybersecurity specialist, and so on. So that was a little bit of the presentation. And of course, I'm happy to answer your question and to go in more detail about those.
Thanks. It's super interesting and really opens the imagination to what the future of the industry will be like. It's true that BIM is one small part of the whole AEC puzzle that we seem to be heading on. So thanks a lot. A question I wanted to know, somebody mentioned in the chat if these slides could be downloaded. So what do you think? Could we have a PDF copy? It's okay if you're not comfortable with it.
I will have a look. There is something confidential.
Okay.
But I think that probably we can share.
Okay, so we'll if it works, so I'll add it within a couple of days at revitpure.com/live. It's when I have show notes, I usually put them in there, so you can have a look there. I'll add the link in the description. Somebody mentioned where they can find the book. It's also in the video description as well. And yeah, while we were talking, there's huge debate in the chat about model versus printed drawings. I would be curious to hear your thoughts about it. Like, I guess from my side, I think that having models as deliverables should be the thing we're headed on. I don't know how long it will be, and not everybody seems to agree about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's really again there are. It really depends on the maturity of your supply chain, if your country, your industry, and so on. Sometimes I speak especially with people from North Europe in Scandinavia, and I have friends also that work in Finland, in Norway, and actually drawings are really the minority. And actually, there are projects that has been submitted just with models. It is a journey, okay? So still, for example, in some contracts, drawings are still the contractual deliverable. So is the reason why we need still to produce drawings. And also this can vary between public sector, private sector, and so on. The technology is there also to work without the drawings. For me, the main barriers are really people and the skills to be able to use that through the entire life cycle. Unfortunately, I still have people that they finish their university degree and they don't know what is a model. They just know how to create drawings. So that is a shame, because then we don't have people ready to enter in the industry and to make the change. So yeah, I mean, I hope when I will retire, maybe Nicholas is the same for you, that we will not discuss about this anymore. But yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, well, to me, it's already a good step, because I'm still working with people. I still see a lot of people still using AutoCAD, and they're still. Do you think it's a good idea to move on to Revit? It's Revit is the future, right? And say, well, it's kind of the present, almost close to the past now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
things are very conservative in our industry, I think, and very slow moving. But some people are moving very fast. But overall,
Exactly.
it's kind of a turtle.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I noticed this. For example, I decide myself, I say, Marzia, where do you want to spend the next 10, 20 years of your career? And I didn't want to spend my time in a practice where they were using AutoCAD. I didn't want to say
Yeah.
no. And so I went for companies that were advanced.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my choice, because it's something that I really believe. But instead, not everyone is lucky enough to have the possibility to choose. But yes, I totally agree that using a BIM-based approach is the way. So yeah, moving away from the 2D.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you, and there's quite a lot of questions in the chat, actually. So if you have time, we can take a few more. I want to be respectful of your time as well. But yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is what I call BIM bureaucracy. Is sometimes I work with clients, and either it can be architects, clients, engineers, and they can get very confused about all the terms in BIMs. Well, first there are all the acronyms like 40, 5D, 6D, 7D, all the Ds. Like personally, I try not use that. I use the word cost estimation, for example, instead of
Well
5D.
done.
I don't like using these terms. I think it's just trying to
Me
make it
neither.
look smarter than it is. It's just cost estimation using new tools. It's still the same thing. So I guess how can you, but at the same time, implementing high-level BIM standards is important as well. But you can lose some people with some complex language and acronyms that can seem really complex for them. And especially when I work with smaller clients, for example, and perhaps some consultants might have pushed them to use really advanced workflows, and they're extremely confused about it. So what are your thoughts about this?
Is a very good point, and I also experience in my day to day. The problem is that in order to sell tools, for example, some people, let's say, created complexity on that, and there is this feeling that BIM is completely another language, and that is where then we fail, because if we start to use all these let's say acronym and so on, we lose people, and I totally agree. At the same time, there is something that we need to do differently, especially how we structure data, for example. So there are new concepts that is being introduced. So my suggestion is really to understand the complexity, but then when you speak with your clients and with your colleagues, try to use play language. So I totally agree with what you said. Try to avoid 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever. Use play language. What you want to do? You want to use your model and to link with the plan, or to do scheduling, or do you want to use for logistics? Do you want to use for health and safety? Because I really get mad when people say, I want to do for 4D. What do you mean? There are a lot of different activities that you can do. So really trying, sometimes we forget about the basics. So this is why also the BIM dictionary is being created also to explain concepts and to be used with your colleagues or with your clients. So yeah, there is the risk that actually is already happening, that BIM is considered a silo. So I think that we will be successful when we will not speak about BIM anymore. So this will be the way that architect will operate, the way that structural engineer will operate, the way that a construction manager they work, because it's about better information management at the end. So at the moment we call ourselves BIM expert, but I hope that in the few years we will move on and just about creating buildings in an effective way. And remember, guys, the construction sector is responsible for the 30% of emission of CO2, and this is not possible. We cannot cope with that with the climate crisis that we are living. And thinking about that, we need also houses to be built and so on. So we need really to use different way of designing, building, and maintaining our assets. And the technology and the methodology that BIM offers is actually an enabler to achieve that.
Yeah, thanks. That's beautifully put. It's true that we emit a lot and we don't get enough attention when it comes to carbon emissions in the industry. There's so many questions. I don't know which one to pick. I don't know if you also have the chat open. If you see something that pops up, it's hard to pick. I don't think we have time to cover them all. But I see a question from an Italian sounding name, Pier Paolo Vergetti. Would it be possible in the future to have a cognitive building, a building capable of learning from users' behavior and adapting to various situations and needs? That's a pretty futuristic question, but pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's futuristic at some point. Actually, we are, as my company, we are dealing with that. Is mainly on the research area, but the topic of linking our asset with sensors is not too far. It's the same with the car, that now the car has all the sensor regarding everything. So we are moving in that direction. What is the question probably that we needed to ask is not is it possible, but is it right? Because I think that we notice that I don't sometimes ask myself, do I want to have a digital twin of my house when they know every time in which room I am, with who I am, what I'm doing, and so on? There is something that probably we need. The more that we understand the power of the technology, we need to ask ourselves, is it the ethical way of doing? There is something regarding improving efficiency, such as the energy consumption, the energy efficiencies of our asset that might is a good way. But at the same time, I think that we need to protect ourselves as humans. Because
Marzia, sorry, I think we lost your camera. We still hear you, but your camera is gone. Not a big deal, though. We were slowly. There you are. You're back. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yes. So I think that I can see that it's on and off. Okay. Good. I think that yes, is possible. It's something that I think that advanced implementation are really now using sensor to understand also behaviors and how we use space, and also to optimize our space. For example, if we notice that we don't use a particular area of our residential or the office, how we can repurpose. And And also there are some quite interesting, for example, performance contracts. So for example, in the designer and the contractors are actually paid based on the performance of what we are being designed and built. So that can be quite interesting because it forces us to create efficient assets.
Yeah, really interesting. And I like what you said as well, that just the BIM acronym itself might be out of date soon. I think it was created and then so, okay, we have CAD and now we have this BIM thing. It was done so people could understand. And I also wonder sometimes if it's still a useless thing to say. I mean, still for a while it will be, so we can differentiate with the existing processes. But yeah, I'm not sure in 20 years we'll still be talking that much about BIM. It will be something else or just another way of speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So I think we'll be closing it. So many great questions. And I could chat about this for hours, like where the future, where this industry is going. I'll have to have a look at the book.
Yeah, I hope that was something like inspirational and yeah, that can give different ideas about where to expand your skills and your knowledge. By the way, the book isn't for no expert, so yeah, trying to keep the concepts really basic. And we are organizing different also podcasts and articles and so on to summarize some of the concepts. So also you can find more information if you follow us in our work.
That all sounds great. Well, quickly before closing, next week, once again, with Fanny Angeles, we'll be talking about historic European modeling in Revit. And thanks to AVAIL for sponsoring this episode of Revit Pure Live. Now back to you, Marzia. Thank you so much for coming to the show. That was super interesting. I could have taken hours of it. Still need to learn so many concepts of BIM standards. And thanks to everybody in the chat as well. Great, super insightful questions. Sorry if we didn't have time to answer them all. But again, I guess you can reach out to Marzia. So thank you very much, Marzia. That was super fun.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, congratulations for your work.
Thanks. So goodbye, everybody, and see you next week, next Wednesday at 3 p.m. with Fanny Angeles. Goodbye.
Bye.